Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Ayman Nazir and welcome to Knowledge Realm. So today students, we're going to study a very interesting story of advent of English colonizers in America. We're going to study that why English took more than 100 years to sail towards America and what finally took English merchants to America. What were the factors behind these two events, and we would study this in detail. This is a very interesting and brutal story of English colonizers, and we would study this in detail. So stay focused and let's get started. English colonizers were the master of colonization. They were the mightiest colonizers at that time. The advent of English colonizers in America took place in 1607. They came to America in 1607 and they settled 13 colonies in America, and we would study these 13 colonies in detail. And they were the last colonizers to leave America. They were the last to come to America. They were the last to start colonization there, and they were the last colonizers to leave America also. We all know that America got independence in 1776 from their British masters, and this shows that they were the last colonizers to leave America. The first colony that English colonizers settled in America was Virginia, and this happened in 1607. In 1607, Virginia, the colony, was established in America by English colonizers. But why English were late in America? Why they took more than 100 years to sail to America? America had already been discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492. But English came to America in 1607. So why they took more than 100 years to sail to America? And why they were last colonizers in America? We would study this in detail today. Reasons behind delay in colonization of America by English. Well, there are many reasons and we would study those reasons today. First of all, there was a conflict within the British Empire, United Kingdom. England was actually facing economic as well as social crisis at the time. There was an outburst of population and there was unemployment, there were social crimes, people were facing poverty, and they were facing theft, robbery, people were killing each other for food, they were facing starvation. So there were many conflicts within the United Kingdom, so the crown could not focus on other things outside the kingdom. Crown was focusing inward and it was just busy in dealing with all these crises in the United Kingdom, so it could not divert its attention to the colonization of America at the time. This was the first reason behind delay in colonization of America by English. Then another very important reason, religious wars in Europe. Now this is very important and interesting to understand. We all know that in 15th and 16th century, there was a war in Europe, and this was a religious war. There were Protestants at one side, and on the other side there were Catholics, and these two sects were fighting with each other. Protestants wanted freedom from the Roman Catholic Church, and the Catholic people, they wanted the continuation of the rule of Roman Catholic Church. And in early 16th century, Protestants started a reformation in Europe. They wanted freedom from the Roman Catholic Church, and in 1533, King Henry VII, who was the king of British Empire at the time, he announced disassociation with the Roman Church, and he established a separate church for England named Anglican Church. He announced freedom from the Roman Church and the Pope. He overthrew Pope. So King Henry sided with the Protestants of that time. Then after that, after King Henry, Queen Mary I was a Catholic. She restored Catholicism in England in 1553 because she took throne in 1553. So she was a Catholic and she restored Catholicism in England in 1553. But after Queen Mary I, there was Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth I, she was a Protestant. So she started this Protestant Reformation in Europe. So these things were happening in Europe at the time. These kings and queens were changing the order of Europe back and forth, and there was the Protestant, then there were Catholics, then once again there were Queen Mary when she was Catholic, and then again Queen Elizabeth when she was a Protestant. So these wars were in Europe, and these wars could not let the crown to focus on other parts of the world, and the crown could not focus on other things in the world, and it was focusing on the internal issues. So this was another reason behind the delay in colonization of America by English. Then another interest, the disinterest of Queen Mary I. I've explained it that Queen Mary I was a Catholic. She was not interested in taking the borders of English Empire to the western part of the world. She was just interested in restoring Catholicism in England in 1553, because his predecessor, King Henry VII, he started a Protestant Reformation in Europe, and he announced disassociation with the Roman Church. So Queen Mary I was busy in Catholicism of the England at the time. She was not interested in colonization of America, so she did not send any colonizers there, and in 1558 she died, and Elizabeth I took the throne, who was a Protestant. Now here we have two more reasons behind the delay in colonization of America by English. First of all, English was interested in colonization of Asian resourceful land. Queen Elizabeth I started colonization, and she sent the first ship to India. In 1583, a ship named Tiger was sent to India to colonize India. They were focused on colonization of estates close to home, such as Ireland. So they were not interested in colonization of America because they did not know much about America. On the other hand, they knew a lot about Asia because they had read the Marco Polo's travelogue, and Marco Polo's travelogue explained that Asian land is full of resources, and Asian land is full of gold and jewels. So they were inspired by these Marco Polo travelogue, and they just wanted to colonize Asia, and they wanted to colonize India, and that's what they did in 16th century and then in 17th century. We all know this. We have studied the history of India also. So they were focused on colonization of estates close to home, such as Ireland, and they were interested in colonization of Asia. On the other hand, they did not know anything about America, and America was also unexplored at that time. So they did not want to spend money in America at the time because there were economic crisis also. So they did not want wastage of their money. Then another very important reason behind this delay was conflict with Spain. We all know that in 16th century, England and Spain, these two were sworn enemies of each other, and Spain was an insurmountable enemy of Britain. Both the imperial powers were fighting constantly. Then a tragedy happened in America in 1585, and we call this tragedy Roanoke tragedy. Students, in 1585, Sir Walter Raleigh made a colony in North Carolina, and Sir Walter Raleigh was from England. So yes, here we are studying that yes, England had sent its colonizers in America in 16th century, in late 16th century, in 1585, and it was the people with the Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Walter Raleigh was the leader of that group of colonizer at the time, and he went to America in 1585. But due to constant fighting between Spain and England, the crown could not provide any supplies to the colony of Sir Walter Raleigh, that was called Roanoke at that time. And the people of England, the people who went with Sir Walter Raleigh, they were foreign there in America. They did not know anyone. They did not know anything. They did not know how to survive here. So they all died. And no one knows that what was the reason behind their death and how it all happened. After some time, they just sent some supplies to the people of Roanoke, and they visited them, and they discovered that the colony was deserted and there was no one in that land. So this was the tragedy that happened due to the conflicts and wars between England and Spain. So these are the reasons that English took more than 100 years to colonize America. So we have studied the reasons behind the delay in the colonization of America by English colonizers. Then finally in 1607, English colonizers sailed to America and they started colonization of America. And the first colony that they set was Virginia, and it happened in 1607. English settlers came to America in 1607. English merchants formed a joint stock company named the London Company, which sponsored colonization of America. James I, who was ruling England at the time, he granted the charter to the company, and English settlers landed in America in 1607. They made a settlement which was called Jamestown in 1607, and Jamestown was named after the King James I. And this was the settlement, Jamestown, and the colony that they established. That was the first colony of English in America. This was called Virginia, and it was called Virginia after Queen Elizabeth I of England, who died in 1603, and it was called Virginia because the Queen Elizabeth I, she was a virgin and she never married. Then students, the English settlers, they faced a very harsh time in America because they were not accustomed to the environment of that land, so they faced a very harsh time. Then in 1609 and 1610 they faced very cruel winters, very harsh winters, and they called these winters starving time because they did not have anything to eat. They used to eat insects and beetles and the leaves and the berries and these kind of things. They did not have anything to eat, and at that time John Smith, he became their leader in the starving times of 1609 and 1610. But they spent this time, they survived this time, and they vowed that this time we would not go back and we would not end this process here, but we would continue the colonization of America. Then the Powhatan tribes, it was a native tribe. It helped English people there. This tribe helped them a lot, and this tribe taught them how to survive in America, and this tribe taught them many things like how to grow crops and where to fish best, and how to survive in America. Then the colonies discovered tobacco there, and they embraced this filthy habit of smoking, and they introduced tobacco to their motherland also, and they started trade of tobacco. They started exporting tobacco to England, and this was a cash crop for English settlers there, and they started earning from this crop. So this was the story of advent of English colonizers in America in 1607. But now here another question pops up in mind, that English did not started colonization of America till 1607. Because there were some factors behind this delay, and we have studied those factors. So what happened that convinced English colonizers to move to America? What were the reasons behind this change of mind, and why they started this colonization of America? What took English settlers to America? Now we're going to study the reasons behind the colonization of America by English colonizers. Now we're going to study that what finally took English to America in 1607. We're going to study the reasons behind this change of mind. Well, the first reason behind this change of mind was internal religious conflict. We all know that there were internal religious conflict in England. There were Protestants, there were Catholics, there were Puritans, and all these were fighting among each other. Different religious sects and creeds were fighting in England. Protestants actually wanted to flee the persecution in England because they were facing persecution at the hand of Catholics. Catholics were persecuting Protestants, and Protestants were also uh, persecuting the Catholics, and Protestants actually wanted freedom from this persecution. Another thing, they actually wanted a land where they could follow the religion that they wanted. They did not want the rule of Roman Church, so they just wanted to flee the persecution in England, the religious and physical persecution also. So there is a very famous name that I want to give here, John Winthrop. John Winthrop left England and settled a new colony called Massachusetts in 1629. And John Winthrop actually he flew the religious persecution from in England. He wanted a land where he could practice the religion that he wanted, and religion was actually the main reason behind his migration to America. So he went to America and he took the permission of king at the time, and he moved to America, and there he settled a new colony, Massachusetts, in 1629. So internal religious conflict was the first reason behind the start of colonization of America by the English colonizers. Then another reason, and this is a very important and interesting reason, Protestant Reformation in England and Queen Elizabeth I, who took throne in 1558. We all have studied this, that Queen Elizabeth I was Protestant, and her predecessor, who was Queen Mary I, she was a Catholic. So Queen Mary I, she was restoring Catholicism in England, but she died in 1558, and Queen Elizabeth I, she took throne in 1558. And Queen Elizabeth I, she was a Protestant. And under the rule of Queen Elizabeth I, England turned Protestant. And we all know that Spain was Catholic, and Spain was preaching Catholicism in America. Spain was preaching Christianity in America. Spain was Catholic and England was Protestant. So this thing gave another dimension of rivalry between these two already rival nations. So to stop the expansion of Catholicism and to balance Spain in America, Queen Elizabeth I started colonization of America, because Queen Elizabeth I did not want the expansion of Catholicism in America. And this is a thing that Spain was doing in America. Spain was expanding, preaching Catholicism in America. So Queen Elizabeth I felt a need to send Protestant people from England to America so that they could balance the Catholicism in America, and they could stop the establishment of a rule of Catholicism in America. Another very interesting reason, elimination of the threat of Spain. We have studied this, that Spain and England, these two imperial powers, were rival, and the main obstacle in the way of colonization and settling in the New World was Spain actually. Spain was intervening in the projects of colonization of America of England. Spain did not want English in America. Spain wanted its hold on America. So Spain was constantly fighting, and Spain was constantly trying to stop the arrival of English in America, and it was constantly waging wars with English. So in 1588, England crippled Spanish Armada. This was a sea fight between the two naval powers, the Spain and England, but England won this war and England crippled Spanish Armada. And after this war, after 1588, the threat of Spain was neutralized for good, and England was free to expand its rule in America. This was a very interesting and very important reason behind the arrival and advent of English in America. Then We all know that England and France, these two imperial powers, were also rival, and England actually wanted to balance the influence of France in America, and England felt a need to send colonizer to America so that it could balance the France. England and France were the two most dominant imperial powers of 17th century. This is what I've written here. France had already colonized some part of America and was busy in trade of fur. We have studied that how France started the colonization of America. It sent Jacques Cartier in 1534, then Samuel D. Champlain. He settled the city of Quebec, and Montreal. Quebec was settled in 1608, and Montreal, I do not remember the date of Montreal, but these two cities were established by the sailors of France, and they established a new France there. They established a French empire there. So English also wanted to balance the threat of France in America, and English also wanted to compete with France, so it sent its colonizers to America. The last two reasons behind the advent of English colonizers to America in 1607. Economic and social crisis in early 1600s in England. We have studied this several times, that England was facing economic as well as social crisis in early 1600s. There was a grip of these crises on England at that time. There was outburst of population and not enough land to accommodate people. People wanted land, people wanted a place to live peacefully, and there was unemployment and decline in income of people. There were social crimes, people were involved in theft, robbery, they were killing each other for food, they were starving in England. So these things took many people of England to America because they believed that there they would have something to eat and they would have land to live and they will be free, and they would not face such social crisis in America. So they moved to America. Then another thing, enclosure movement of 1620. We all know that in 1620 all the rich people of England, who were just 10% of England, they started an enclosure movement. Because what is enclosure movement? I can explain it. Enclosure movement was actually the conversion of a land that was open for use of anybody in England. But the rich people converted this land from public to private, and they started fencing of this land. They started closing this land. This was the land where the animals and domestic animals of poor people used to graze, and where these people used to eat fruits and these things. But in 1620, when England was facing severe economic crisis, the rich people who owned that land converted this land from public to private, and they stopped letting the poor people use this area, use the land, and they started fencing of their land. They started privatization of the land, and they did not let any poor people enter their land. So this was the enclosure movement of 1620, and it shows that there were economic and social crisis in England. Then another very important and interesting reason that I read in the book Short History of USA by Robert V. Romini. This is the reason that I read in that book. Writing of intellectuals. Well, the intellectuals of England, they started writing about the colonization of America. They started writing on this topic. Richard Hakluyt, this is the person that you can see right here on the left of this slide. Richard Hakluyt was actually an intellectual, and he wrote letters to Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I was a Protestant, and she was interested in colonization of America. So Richard Hakluyt, he actually convinced Queen Elizabeth I to colonize America to compete with Catholics. His letters were called Discourse of Western Planting, 1584, and he wrote these letters in 1584. So he tried to convince Queen Elizabeth I to colonize America. He gave some arguments. He said that Catholics are colonizing America and they would they would expand Catholicism in the entire America, and the entire continent would be Catholic then, and it would be a great power against England if it turns Catholic. So we should balance Spain there, and we should start colonization of America, and we should stop this expansion of Catholicism in America. This was the first argument of Richard Hakluyt. He believed that Queen Elizabeth I should send some colonizers to America so that they could balance the influence of Catholics in America. Because Queen Elizabeth I, she was Protestant, and she sent some Protestant colonizers in America. Then another reason Richard Hakluyt gave, that we should exploit the social and economic possibilities for English people. He said that we should go to America and we should not let Spanish use all the resources of America, and we should exploit the social and economic possibilities for English people. We should explore that land, and we should exploit these possibilities, and we should extract all the resources for the people of England and for the crown of England. And this was actually the main goal of colonizers at the time. They used to just exploit, and they used to just extract the economic resources of the territories that they used to colonize. So this was another reason behind the colonization of America by English people. So today we have studied that why English took more than 100 years to sail to America, and why they took more than 100 years to colonize America. Because America had already been discovered in 1492 by Christopher Columbus, but English did not bother to colonize America till 1607. And in 1607, finally, the English colonizers established their first colony in America, which was called Virginia. So we studied the factors behind the delay, and then we studied the factors that finally took English to America in 1607. And we have studied this in detail. I hope that the whole concept is clear now in the minds of all the students, all the listeners who are listening to me right now. I hope everything is clear. And all this knowledge, I must mention this thing here, that all this knowledge is authentic here. So we have not studied the establishment of 13 colonies by English colonizers in America. We know that English colonizers established 13 colonies in America, and they were the mightiest colonizers in America, and they were the last colonizers to leave America in 1776. Because there's a whole long story behind this colonization, behind the setting of 13 colonies in America, and we need an entire separate lecture for that story. So the story is still in continuation, and we would study that story in the next lecture, inshallah. So just to stay in touch with the Knowledge Realm, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe Knowledge Realm. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.